Imagine a watch that never needs a battery change. That gets its energy simply from the movement of your wrist. But that isn't an automatic watch either. Its accuracy is that of a quartz. Its operation is reminiscent of a mechanical watch. And for years, it was considered one of the greatest technological breakthroughs ever created by Seiko. That watch exists, and it's called Kinetic. But how does it really work? Why was it so revolutionary? And why does almost nobody talk about it today? Today, we're going to discover the incredible story of the Seiko Kinetic movement. The problem Seiko wanted to solve. Talk about the 70s and 80s, after the Quartz crisis. Quartz watches dominated the market. They were very accurate, very cheap. But they had a problem. The battery. Millions of batteries ended up dying every few years. Users had to go get them replaced. And Seiko started to wonder, what if a quartz watch could generate its own electricity? That idea seemed impossible. But Seiko had been researching for years. The birth of Kinetic. By the mid-80s, Seiko had already proven to the world that it was capable of changing the history of watchmaking. After revolutionizing the industry with quartz, the Japanese company once again asked itself a question that seemed impossible to answer. What if a quartz watch could generate its own electricity? At the time, most quartz watches relied on a conventional battery. They were extremely accurate, but sooner or later that battery would run out and have to be replaced. To many, it might seem like a minor inconvenience, but for Seiko's engineers, it was a technological challenge worth solving. After years of research and development, in 1986, the brand unveiled a prototype that left manufacturers and enthusiasts around the world astonished. Its name was AGS, short for Automatic Generating System. At first glance, it looked like a conventional automatic watch. It even featured a rotor very similar to the one found in a mechanical movement. But that's where the similarities ended. In a traditional automatic watch, that rotor transmits its energy to a mainspring, which is responsible for storing the energy and driving the entire mechanism. In the AGS, however, the rotor didn't wind any spring. Every movement of the wrist spun a tiny generator capable of transforming mechanical energy into electricity. That electricity was stored to power a high-precision quartz movement. It was a completely new concept. It wasn't an automatic watch. It wasn't a conventional quartz watch either. It was a combination of both worlds that, until then, no one had managed to bring to production in such an effective way. Over the following 2 years, Seiko continued to refine the technology. The engineers improved the generator's efficiency, optimized the energy storage system, and worked to turn that promising prototype into a reliable product for everyday use. Finally, in 1988, the big moment arrived. Seiko officially launched the first watch equipped with this innovative technology. Shortly afterwards, the system would leave the AGS name behind and adopt a much more commercial and memorable designation, Kinetic, a name that perfectly described its essence. The energy didn't come from a disposable battery, nor from winding it by hand. It came from the natural movement of whoever wore the watch on their wrist. At a time when most manufacturers were still dividing their collections between mechanical and quartz watches, Seiko had created a completely new third category. A technology so advanced for its time that many considered it one of the greatest achievements of Japanese watchmaking engineering. How Kinetic works. This is where the most visual part comes in. Explained step by step. Wrist movement. Rotor. Microgenerator. Electricity. Capacitor, later a rechargeable battery. Quartz movement. Important to explain that. It doesn't move the hands directly. It generates electricity. It's practically a tiny power plant in miniature. The heart of the system. To understand why the kinetic movement was so special, you have to look inside. Because beneath the dial, we don't just find a quartz movement. We find a small chain of engineering where every component plays an essential role. It all begins with the rotor. Just like in a traditional automatic watch, this semicircular piece spins with the natural movement of the wrist. Every time we walk, move our arm, or change position, the rotor springs into action. But here comes the big difference. In an automatic watch, the rotor winds a spring. In a kinetic, the rotor drives a system of gears designed to enormously multiply the speed of rotation. The movement of the wrist is relatively slow, so it wouldn't be enough to generate electricity efficiently. That's why those tiny gears transmit and accelerate the motion until the generator spins at a much higher speed. That's when the microgenerator comes into play. This component transforms the mechanical energy produced by the rotor into electrical energy. In other words, the watch converts every movement of the wrist into electricity. A true miniature power plant operating inside a case just a few millimeters thick. The generated energy then passes to the accumulator. The earliest models used a capacitor, while later generations incorporated a more efficient rechargeable battery with far greater autonomy. The accumulator works like a reservoir. It stores the electricity produced during the day and allows the watch to keep running even when it's not on the wrist. But generating and storing energy isn't enough. It also needs to be controlled. That's where the integrated circuit comes in, the electronic brain of the movement. This circuit manages the available energy, regulates its consumption, and makes sure every component receives exactly the electricity it needs. Thanks to this extremely precise management, the movement can run for months on a surprisingly small amount of energy. Finally, we find the quartz crystal. When it receives electricity, this tiny crystal vibrates at an extremely stable frequency. The circuit counts those vibrations and converts them into perfectly regular electrical pulses. Those pulses control the motor that moves the hands. And so, all the energy that began with a simple movement of the wrist ends up being transformed into precise, constant timekeeping. Rotor, gears, microgenerator, accumulator, integrated circuit, quartz crystal. Each element depends on the one before it. If one fails, the entire system stops working properly. And that is precisely what's fascinating about the Kinetic. It's not purely mechanical, it's not purely electronic. It's a combination of both, joined together through precision engineering. A movement in which the force of the wrist, a series of microscopic gears, and a quartz crystal work together to do something extraordinary, create its own energy and turn it into time. Why was it so revolutionary? This is where you sell the idea. Until then, there were two worlds. Automatics, quartz, kinetic blended both. The convenience of quartz, the energy of an automatic. No battery changes. Very eco-friendly. Very innovative. It was literally a hybrid decades before hybrid cars became popular. The evolution of kinetic. Talk about Kinetic Auto Relay, Kinetic Perpetual, Kinetic GMT direct drive, each one solving new problems. For example, Auto Relay put the watch to sleep and, when moved, automatically restored the correct time. Very eye-catching. Advantages. Very accurate, no conventional battery needed, huge power reserve, very reliable, very low maintenance, ideal for daily wear. Drawbacks. Not everything was perfect. The accumulator ages. If it sits unused for years, it can deteriorate. Repairs can be more expensive. The movements are complex. Many watchmakers aren't very familiar with them. Why did Seiko almost abandon it? Here comes an interesting part. EcoDrive arrived. Solar arrived. Batteries improved. Demand dropped. Automatics came back into fashion. The market started looking for emotional watches, not just technology. Kinetic gradually lost its prominence. Is it still worth it in 2026? Give an objective opinion. If you buy a used one in good condition, yes, you get Japanese engineering, great accuracy, low maintenance history. What's more, many models have become genuine collector's watches. The kinetic movement proves something very interesting. That innovation doesn't always mean replacing one technology with another. Sometimes it means bringing together the best of both. And that's exactly what Seiko did. It took the precision of quartz, combined it with the magic of an automatic rotor, and created one of the most original movements in the entire history of watchmaking. It may not be the most popular movement today. Many enthusiasts may never even have worn one. But its influence lives on. Because before anyone talked about sustainability, before modern solar watches, and before technological hybrids, Seiko had already imagined a watch capable of producing its own energy. And that even today, remains a true feat of engineering. Now I want to hear your opinion. Do you think the Kinetic was a technology ahead of its time? Or do you think Seiko was right to later bet on other solutions like solar? I'll be reading your comments because I'm sure there will be some very interesting opinions. If you enjoyed this documentary and want to keep discovering the history, the engineering, and the secrets hidden inside the world's most fascinating watches, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next videos. And if you know someone who owns a Seiko Kinetic, share this video with them. They might just start looking at their watch with new eyes after watching it. Thank you so much for joining us once again here at Mundo Relojes, and see you very soon in the next video.